Well, amid a world as divisive as it has ever been, sports as a whole continues to produce various hot take debates, many of which have been waging for decades now, and some of which will likely never come to an end. Perhaps none of the major professional sports in the United States of America lends itself more to these kinds of debates than does the National Basketball Association. Look no further than the unending GOAT debate. But in that same vein, another hot topic is that of the top 10 all-time list, something I personally have been asked to produce for virtually the entirety of the time I've been posting content to this channel. And while I have admittedly been procrastinating the production of such a list, the time has come, without any further ado, for me to publish my top 10 list of all time. Well, sort of. Stay tuned to the end of this video to see my one small caveat to that number. And the most important thing before listing the players is to define the parameters of what governs our individual lists. Personally, I value two-way players who won at a high level and who impacted their team's ability to win challenging titles. That doesn't mean ring counting, it means evaluating the quality of the rings. I have and always will place a high value on the defensive side of the ball, but while it is pretty easy to gauge the impact a player has on the offensive side of things, it is fundamentally difficult to gauge just what exactly constitutes an elite defensive player. And while it does go without saying that media-bestowed accolades aren't necessarily the be-all and end-all determinant for purposes of this conversation, well, I have looked at every player in NBA history that has made a minimum of 5 All-NBA team selections and 5 All-NBA defensive selections throughout the course of their careers. And there are, surprisingly, only 24 players total throughout league history who have met these criteria, with only 3 players ever making at least 10 All-NBA teams and 10 All-NBA defensive team selections through the course of their careers. Those 3 players constitute the number 2, 3, and 4 all-time players on my personal list. And that is beginning with Kobe Bryant at the 2 spot, arguably the most complete individual player in league history behind, well, only one. That one, of course, is Michael Jordan, who sits atop my all-time rankings at number 1. Jordan, who constitutes the most complete player in NBA history, he led the league in scoring 10 times while making 9 All-NBA defensive teams, is one of only 3 players ever to win League MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. And he won 6 NBA championships in 6 finals appearances while never playing with more than one single All-Star in any single season. And Michael Jordan represents the only perfect resume in league history, in my humble opinion. The only player without flaw or weakness in his case, and therefore he is an easy number 1 on my all-time list. Next, the aforementioned Kobe Bryant, who was an undisputed top 3 offensive force in league history, leading the decade of the 2000s in both points scored and average points per game. He is one of only 2 players ever to accomplish that feat, joining just Wilt Chamberlain in the 1960s and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the 1970s. And despite the decade of the 2000s being by far the lowest scoring, slowest paced decade ever, again, by far, Kobe is still top 3 all time in most 40, 50, and 60-point games. So while he was far and away the greatest offensive player of his era, Kobe also made 9 first-team defensive selections, which is tied with Michael Jordan, Gary Payton, and Kevin Garnett for the most in NBA history. And yes, Kobe, like Jordan, was also an elite winner, winning 5 championships of his 7 finals appearances while playing more 50-win teams than anyone in league history and beating more 50-win teams than anyone in league history. Kobe is also the only player ever to win back-to-back titles without a single other top 75 player on his team. Now moving on into my number 3 slot, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Perhaps the greatest resume in basketball history, Kareem is top 4 in 3 standard box categories, 2nd all-time in scoring, 3rd all-time in blocks, and 4th all-time in rebounds. He went to 10 finals while winning 6 of them and has 6 league MVPs. That would be the most in NBA history. Now, the major knock on Kareem and why I personally bumped him down from my 2 slot recently is because he just never won that challenging championship. Kareem won his first title in his 2nd NBA season in 1971. His running mate for that title was the legendary Oscar Robertson. Kareem then won absolutely nothing until his aged 32 season in 1980 when he paired with Magic Johnson. So all 6 of Kareem's titles came with one of the 2 greatest point guards in NBA history, and while he was in his absolute peak during the decade of the 1970s, the greatest parity-driven decade in the sport's history, he managed to win nothing at all. So while it is difficult to find an issue with this resume, coupled with 6 rings, Jabbar does lose enough style points to take him down to number 3 on my personal list. Up next, and technically filling out the final spot on my personal Mount Rushmore, another underrated all-time great in my estimation, just like Kobe, and who played in the same exact era as Kobe, and in the same conference for that matter, Tim Duncan. Duncan is 3rd all-time in net defensive rating. He actually has the most total All-NBA defensive selections in NBA history and is arguably the best defender this side of Bill Russell. But Duncan certainly didn't have a great wealth of supporting casts around him. Sure, he had perennial All-Stars and Hall of Famers in Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili for the majority of his career, but Duncan played with only one other top 75 player in his entire career, and that was David Robinson, who retired from the NBA when Duncan was only 26 years of age. But that certainly didn't stop Duncan from winning 5 championships in his 6 finals appearances while going through, like Kobe Bryant, some of the most difficult conferences in league history. These 4 players, elite, 2-way guys who all won at least 5 titles. And while the number 5 spot on my all-time list doesn't have those gaudy ring counts, he did win perhaps the most difficult title in NBA history, and he also produced arguably the greatest single season in NBA history. So while Hakeem Olajuwon may have only 2 NBA titles in his career, he also had, without close comparison, the least support of any all-time great player. Olajuwon played with Ralph Sampson, who made an all-star team the first 3 seasons Hakeem was in the NBA, while Sampson even made a second-team All-NBA selection in Hakeem's rookie season of 1984-85. But alas, it was the only time in Olajuwon's entire career that he played with a single teammate that was selected to an All-NBA team. It came again in his first season. Sampson, however, would leave Houston after a series of injuries in 1987, and for the next 8 years until the Rockets acquired Clyde Drexler in advance of the NBA trade deadline in 1995, That, by the way, would be Hakeem's aged 25 to 32 seasons. Olajuwon would play exactly 1 year with one All-Star, and that was Otis Thorpe in the 91-92 season. It was Thorpe's one and only All-Star appearance in his entire 19-year career, and he was the best player prime Hakeem Olajuwon got to play with. Hakeem still managed back-to-back titles in 94 and 95. In 1994, Olajuwon won League MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, the NBA Championship, and the Finals MVP award. He is still, to date, the only player ever to win all 4 of those things in one season. And he did it with Vernon Maxwell as his second leading scorer during the playoffs. While in 1995, Olajuwon would win what should be considered the single most difficult title in NBA history, beating the 60-win Stockton and 2-time League MVP Karl Malone Jazz in the first round. Yes, a 60-win opponent in the first round. In the second round, it was the 59-win former MVP Charles Barkley's Suns. Then in the Western Conference Finals, it was the 62-win San Antonio Spurs, led by that very season's league MVP in David Robinson. And then finally, awaiting him in the NBA Finals would be future league MVP Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway's Orlando Magic, a team that actually beat Jordan's Chicago Bulls as Jordan returned with 17 games left in the regular season before heading into the playoffs that year and falling in 6 games to the Magic in the Eastern Conference semifinals. And Hakeem would dominate that Magic team and Shaquille O'Neal in the NBA Finals, sweeping them 4 games to none. So in case you haven't been keeping up, 4 rounds, 4 league MVPs, and a collective winning percentage by his 4 opponents of 73%, the highest faced by any champion by far in NBA history. Olajuwon also remains the only player in NBA history to rank top 15 in 4 of the 5 major NBA statistical categories. And these top 5 players now on my list represent the most complete basketball players in league history, in my opinion. There will be, no doubt, a fair share of criticism over my number 6 player due to his perceived limitations on the offensive side of the ball. And yes, it is true that Bill Russell is only a 15-point-per-game career scorer at just 44% shooting from the field. He not once, ever, averaged over 20 points per game in any single season of his entire career, and he never shot over 50% from the field, and that was while playing the vast majority of his career in the 1960s, which is the fastest-paced, highest-scoring decade ever. And yes, I am aware that when he won his first title in 1957, there were only 8 teams in the league and still just 14 when he won his final championship in 1969. Finally, yes, I am aware that the 60s-era Celtics team by championship year had anywhere between 6 to 9 Hall of Famers on its roster. And that is why Bill Russell is not in my top 5. Because yes, he was not an elite offensive player, and he did have an incredible assortment of supporting cast. But he was the undisputed leader of a team that won 11 NBA championships in 13 years, which, by the way, included 8 straight. He won 5 league MVP awards in his 13-year career, and keep in mind, they actually meant something back then because they were all voted on by the players, his peers. Bill Russell is the greatest defensive player in league history and did it in the most prolific offensive era ever. The most storied winner and the greatest leader in league history deserves a prominent placement on mine or any other list, even if it was a relatively limited offensive player with a multitude of other Hall of Famers flanking him. And now moving into my 7 and 8 slots, Two guys that are intrinsically tied together, and for that reason are somewhat admittedly difficult to differentiate between. The guys that revolutionized the league and put the NBA on the map during the 1980s. Of course, we're talking Bird and Magic, with at least one of these two players appearing in every single NBA Finals series that was played from 1980 to 1990, with the two of them combining to win 8 of 9 championships during that span. Magic won 5 of them, while Bird won 3, and despite the fact Magic won more, I personally lean Bird above Magic for my 7 spot because Bird realistically had less help and was also the more complete overall player. Bird, an underrated defender in my opinion, who made 3 All-NBA defensive teams throughout his career, which was 3 more, mind you, than Magic Johnson, also boasts 24 points per game, 10 rebound, and 6 assist career averages. The only player in NBA history to average at least 24 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists for a career. He is also one of only 9 players in league history to shoot at least 50% from the field, 40% from the three-point line, and 90% from the free throw line for an entire season, and he did it twice. One of only 3 players to do it multiple times, though. And while Bird did have an ample amount of support throughout his career, playing with perennial All-Stars and multiple Hall of Famers, there is no denying that the 80s Lakers is likely the greatest team ever assembled, at least in the post-merger modern era, with 2 consensus top 10 all-time players, Kareem, number 3 on my list, and Magic, number 8, paired up with another top 50 player all-time in James Worthy. And that is while playing in one of the weakest conferences in league history, the 1980s Western Conference, with the Lakers' 84, 85, 87, and 88 finals runs constituting the easiest path in NBA history based on their opponents' regular season win percentages. Not just that, but based on the SRS or simple rating system, only one of Magic's 5 titles made the top 30 list of most difficult. So an absolutely loaded supporting cast for his entire career, coupled with, outside of his finals opponents, by and large an incredibly easy path year in and year out, results in Magic landing in the 8th slot with Bird at 7. That being said, Magic did not only help revolutionize the league, but did the same for the point guard position as a whole, and is still the greatest point in league history. And he still has the highest career assists per game average with 11.19 per game. He went to 9 finals in only 13 seasons and won 5 of them. And now we get to the player, the first one who has lost more than he has won, but whose individual excellence and overall dominance is just too extreme to overlook. No, it's not LeBron. Of course, I'm talking about Wilt Chamberlain, the absolute freak physical anomaly that led the NBA in scoring for his first 7 NBA seasons. And that included his rookie year when Chamberlain averaged an absurd 38 points and 27 rebounds per game. And he won Rookie of the Year that year and League MVP, that in just his first season. And in the 6 years that would follow, Chamberlain assaulted the NBA like no player before or since. From his rookie season to his aged 29 year, Chamberlain played 543 of a possible 574 games while averaging 47 minutes per game. During that span of time, Chamberlain averaged 40 points per game and 27 rebounds. Again, for 7 years in a row, while playing nearly every game and every minute of every game. And Wilt, accordingly, has the most 40, 50, and 60-point games by an absolute absurd video game-like margin. He has nearly 100 more 40-point games than Michael Jordan, who is number 2 on that list, with 271 40-point games. He has over double the 40-point games that Kobe Bryant scored, and Kobe is number 3 on that list by a substantial margin. 50-point games, well, it's even more absurd, as Chamberlain's 118 is more than Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, James Harden, Elgin Baylor, and Damian Lillard had combined. Those players make up the 2 through 6 spots on that very list. Noticing a trend here? Then it should come as absolute no surprise that Chamberlain also has significantly outpaced anyone else in NBA history in career 60-point games. Not only does his 32 60-point games far exceed Kobe Bryant, who is second on that list with 6, but every other player in NBA history has combined to score just 50 total 60-point games. Now, he did play in the turbocharged decade of the 1960s, which was the highest scoring, fastest-paced era ever, the only one to rival that of the 2020s. So factoring that in, along with his final struggles, winning only 2 titles of his 6 finals appearances over his 14-year career, and for those failures, he does fall slots on my list. But his dominance is literally second to none. And for that reason, Chamberlain does make the 9th spot on my all-time list. And now for the number 10 spot. Well, not exactly, because when ranking any top 10s of anything, I personally always leave the final spot open for a few potentials. An honorable mention spot, if you will. And frankly, I also believe there to be a pretty substantial drop-off from my top 9 to the remainder of the field, at least at this time. And yes, I do believe there are a number of viable candidates who could occupy it. Yes, I will admit, for instance, that while I am routinely very difficult on LeBron James, he of course does have a claim to be in the top 10. The all-time leading scorer in NBA history with 4 league MVP awards should warrant a level of consideration. But there is no doubt the era-specific rules changes, pace of play, and lack of defense beginning at basically the midpoint of his career, coupled with the insane length of time he has played for, has substantially inflated his career stat totals, which also, may I add, includes the most career turnovers and missed shots in NBA history, both in the regular season and the playoffs. And while he has won 4 titles, I cannot confidently say he would have won a single one without leaving Cleveland and stacking the decks, ring-chasing his way to 3 different teams in his prime. Karl Malone, for instance, is the 3rd leading scorer in league history, has 14 All-NBA selections, which is 5th most ever, and has 2 league MVPs, yet he barely scrapes into most people's consensus top 15 to 20 all time because he never won a single title. But he also stayed in Utah until he was 40 years old. What if he leapt around the league amassing super teams from his aged 26 season on while maximizing his individual opportunity to win as many rings as possible? So while I perhaps can't say LeBron definitively would have won 0 titles if he stayed in Cleveland, you simply can't say definitively that he wouldn't have 0 if he stayed. We simply don't know, because every title LeBron has won has been under ideal circumstances. He has played with elite rosters from age 26 on, and he is entering his aged 41 season next year. Additionally, he played the vast majority of his entire career in the putrid JV Lee Stern Conference. Yet and still, despite playing for 22 years and counting while experiencing unparalleled durability, has only managed 4 titles of his 10 finals appearances. And for that reason, even in his own era, you can make a case for Steph Curry to be placed above Bron and for him to claim that 10th spot. Curry is, after all, the greatest shooter of all time, and he too has 4 titles, 3 of which came directly against LeBron. I can also see a case for Shaquille O'Neal to occupy this spot, arguably the second most dominant player ever after Chamberlain, who, like Curry and LeBron, also has 4 rings. But like Curry and LeBron, did Shaq ever win a single challenging title? He won 3 of his 4 with Kobe Bryant, and his 4th with another All-NBA first-team caliber guard and top 5 all-time positional player in Dwayne Wade. Julius Erving is another one, in my opinion, who gets consideration for that 10th spot, especially if we are factoring in his time playing in the ABA, which, if we do, the doctor has quite the resume, including 3 titles, 4 MVPs, and is 8th on the all-time scoring list. While you can make a viable case, he was the best player and the most culturally significant one of the 1970s, not Kareem. Finally, there are a crop of current players that I believe have the potential to rise all the way past these ones I have just mentioned and claim that 10th and final spot. First, foremost, and most prominently, there is Nikola Jokic, who has won 3 of the last 5 league MVPs, which, quite frankly, should have been 5 straight in my opinion. Still, though, he has finished top 2 in 5 straight years, joining Bill Russell and Larry Bird as the only players in league history to accomplish that feat. Jokic possesses perhaps the most unique offensive skill set of any player who has ever played, and while he does have just 1 title to this point, he also is the only league MVP ever who has never played with a single All-Star or All-NBA designated player in the first 10 years of his career. So he has had even less help to this point than the great Hakeem Olajuwon, who found his way to number 5 on my all-time list with just 2 rings. If Jokic maintains this level of individual dominance for another 4 or 5 years, he would warrant serious consideration for my top 10 list, even if he doesn't win a single other title. As could potentially Giannis Antetokounmpo, who, just like Jokic, has been absolutely victimized by his negligent organization for the vast majority of his career, playing with a series of subpar supporting casts. He, though, just like with Jokic, has still somehow managed to find his way to a title, and Giannis is an elite 2-way player, joining Hakeem Olajuwon and Michael Jordan as the only players in league history to win both a league MVP and Defensive Player of the Year award. And did I mention both of those players, Giannis and Jokic, are only 30 years old? Yes, the NBA is littered with legendary players dating back to the 1950s. So the reason I have procrastinated putting out my list is because, frankly, it is nearly impossible to whittle them all down to just 10 spots, then to rank them within those 10 spots, with a new crop of elite players adding to the pantheon of legends seemingly every season. Omitting certain players in favor of others isn't hating, it's just feasibly a very difficult task. So whether you agreed or disagreed with my personal list, it is something I put a lot of time and effort into evaluating. And as always, I look forward to seeing what player or players might next be applying the pressure on me to rethink all of it.